Yo.
Yeah, man, how's it going?
Uh, Not too bad. Beginning of the week. Uh, just trying to find the right place to do this episode. My wife's in there doing a video call for work, and I tried to do it outside, but you hear all the beeping, all the construction going on. So this is, I guess, the only room I could really do it in until I can get the situation set up at the studio. But how about you?
Right. Man, just chilling, dude. Just chilling.
Yeah, you busy this week at all?
Nah, man, I got a couple little things I'm doing on the computer. But no shoots. I'm
No
pretty
shoots.
pretty light for the next couple weeks. Got to shoot in 2 weeks, and then that's all I got right now, man.
Yeah. Well, it's good that there's some stuff possibly down the pipeline.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I had a good couple months, so I'm good.
That's all it takes, sometimes. Uh, but
Yeah, a couple good pop. Yeah, you're straight.
exactly. But I appreciate you being on again. I know last time we tried to do this, it went pretty good. I just think that I definitely wanted to approach this a little bit differently than last time. Not that your story and your career isn't significant. It's just I think there was a more of a conversation around kind of not only yourself, but some more things that you've probably experienced and been aware of in the industry. Um, uh, just there's just more talking points than just kind of like the timeline of things. There's a lot of things that
Yeah.
are very very relatable to now, what a lot of people kind of go through in their careers. I think I want to say last time we talked about it, I think you might have been talking about like the the pivot that a lot of people kind of don't really go towards because a lot of people kind of get stuck in
Mm,
their own ways. And
yeah.
you mentioned 2020 being a like a really interesting year for a lot of people because a lot of people probably needed to pivot. Like you said, you kind of pivoted this year. Um,
Yeah.
Maybe
Sure.
go into a little bit detail about like how you pivoted this year.
Yeah, for sure. Are we rolling now?
Yeah, we're going.
All right, we're going. Yeah, man, the pivot for 2020 for me, just like everyone else was what's the word? Unplanned and necessary.
Mm-hmm.
Like everyone else, I remember March 13th, I was on a job in Minneapolis and we were at a like fancy client dinner and you know it felt like 2020 was going the right direction, like I had already done a few great jobs. I'm having dinner at like one of the nicest restaurants in Minneapolis. The clients are, happily paying for more food than any of us could eat. We're just, everything felt great, you know what I mean? And there was a couple NBA games on that night. And I remember I wanted to get back to the hotel to watch, I believe it was a Pelicans game because of Zion Williamson. And we got to the hotel lobby and like there was a bunch of TVs in the lobby and they were like, oh, they're canceling the game, due to COVID. And it was just like this instantaneous, like, oh my God, like this is real. And then like an hour later, Chris Stanford, who I was shooting for, was like, hey man, we might have to, take the rental car and drive it back home because we don't know if they're gonna shut down airports and all that. And it was like, oh my God, like how did this go from everything's cool to like, wow, it's real, right? Like March 13th, it really felt like we knew about the virus, but like there were no like ramifications of my life, right?
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I went whatever 2 or 3 months from that day not working after maybe a 3 4 year run of feeling like I was booked as much as I wanted to be booked. um, so I instantaneously went into what everyone else probably went into, which is like financial insecurity. right? So I'm like, you know, I think for a month I was just a total mess, you know, even though I wasn't financially in a bad spot. I have been so many times in my career that it just like, it sparked that part of my brain that I'm like, oh, it's over for me, right? Like I'm gonna lose everything. You know what I mean? And
Mm-hmm.
you know, I'm a little older than some of the people that are just getting into this industry. So, you know, the older you get, that idea gets harder. I don't, you know, I think anybody could agree with that, right? Like I've been going in this industry for 20 years and finally felt like I got my footing and felt secure. And I was like, I can't believe this. Like, that's going to go away, right? And
Especially with having a family, right?
exactly, yes. My girlfriend was pregnant, due in, yeah, sometime in May. So exactly, that really intensified my fear. I'm like, I'm a photographer, cinematographer with a kid on the way and like no sign of income, you know. So then it became this daily thing where it's like, all right, how much money do I have to survive, right? How many months can I survive if nothing happens, you know? And it just like, God, it was just so, yeah, it was terrible. You know, and I'm not alone in that. Like we all went through it.
Mm-hmm.
But at some point, I just like went down to my garage where I have all my gear and I was like, what can I do right now with nobody? And I had a Mavic 2 drone and I was like, I'm gonna go drone, you know, literally to like as a method to get out of my house, one, two, to like stop the chatter in my brain that like the world's over, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I just went out and started droning like a lot. And it became really therapeutic. And then I realized, you know, maybe I should edit something with this. And I don't really edit, but I was like, I'm gonna edit and edit in a way that's just for me, right? So I went and shot, and I tried to like shoot the drone experimentally, you know, making it move a bunch of crazy ways, like not worrying if I crashed it, which I ended up crashing it because I got a little too crazy. Um, and then editing it in a in an unconventional way. Like I did like this mirror image drone video, like
Mm-hmm.
reversing speeds and just like I literally turned off the part of my brain that was like, what would a client want for this? And I just went to like creative, like younger me zone, which was like, I don't care about anybody but giving me like some creative, you know, juices. And
Mm-hmm.
that was like the first moment of the pivot, which was like, wow, I haven't done anything for me creatively in long time, like far too long.
Mm-hmm.
So it flipped that switch, right? And I got some cool responses from it. Like it felt like when I dropped that video, the reactions I was getting from text messages, some phone calls, Instagram messages was like, you know, I think it was good for people to see me go out and do that as much as it was for me, because it was like I was also trying to like tell the universe, like, you're not stopping me. You know what I mean? Like, I don't care if I'm getting paid. I don't care if I ever get paid again. Like, I'm gonna show the world, like, I will create with a camera regardless of outside influence, you know? So that was like me just trying to like make a statement to the universe that like this isn't going to stop me and I love this to the point that nothing will stop it, you know. So that was like the initial pivot. And what ended up happening after that was Sig, who shoots the ATL bike life scene, and Matt Swinsky, who's a director, cinematographer, editor, two super talented guys. They had been working on a documentary for the bike life scene in Atlanta, and something that was like on my wish list of things to shoot. Um, and they called me out maybe, I don't know, June maybe, to go shoot something. And I had been practicing hooking up my Mobi to my car. And that was a technique that I've been trying to get happening and was a goal at 2020. Professionally, like I ended up using that as a way to practice car rigs with my Mobi. And again, one of the most beautiful things of that was that no client, and these two guys didn't care what I did. They just wanted to get out and create, just like I wanted to create with the drone. So like it started becoming this thing where it's like money doesn't matter anymore, right? Because money's not coming anyways, right? So let's stop worrying about money, even though I never stopped, you know what I mean? But like, let me stop worrying about money in regards to my art and creating. And man, it's like the best thing that ever happened to me. You know what I mean? Because I've been creating a decent amount during the pandemic, and taking chances I wasn't taking before. You know, I wasn't taking like big chances and all this stuff I'm talking about, but definitely getting out of my comfort zone. So that's, you know, that's the pivot, you know, and I think it's, and now has led to me shooting some music videos, which I hadn't done music videos in like 10 years, right? And I wasn't trying to shoot music videos, but the pivot during COVID has helped me with these music videos because I like to control things, you know, like I want to have it all buttoned up and organized and clean and perfect and no surprises, right? Music videos are the exact opposite of that. I don't care who you are. There's no way, like you can't control a music video set. You can to a certain extent. And I think if you did control it fully, it wouldn't be a watchable video. You know,
True.
part of what makes music videos watchable is the chaos and energy that are intertwined. And so another pivot with the music videos was letting go of my control, you know, which I was doing with the drone and the bike life stuff. And then this really, like, you know, it got me out of my way essentially. And that's, you know, that's kind of my, you know, pandemic in a nutshell.
Yeah, I think you hit on some really interesting things there when it comes to doing work for yourself, just being creative for yourself. Can you remember the last time you did something just for yourself pre-COVID?
No, I don't.
Mm.
Like
Wow.
I've done a few things with other people. I will say at some point 4 or 5 years ago, I made an effort to collaborate. And I did. Like, I think my collaborations over the last 5 years are immense. And, you know, I was getting, it's lonely to be a photographer, you know, and like you're a photo assistant, it's not as lonely because you get to work with different people all the time, see different things, right? But like a lot of photographers probably can relate to this. It's like once your career gets going, you work with the same few people and the same few clients, and it just becomes really closed, you know? And I made an effort to like to collab with people in photo or video, but also maybe regardless of my role. I just wanted to like jump in on things. So I've done a lot of collaborative things, but I couldn't tell you the last time I just went out and did something purely for myself. I literally couldn't tell you. And yeah, it's something we all need to be doing. You know what I mean? Like even if that's maybe buying like a 35mm film camera that you have on set, and like when you shoot with that, it's like that's for you, you know? You know, even if you sneak just one roll off during a shoot, you know, I think it's super important because I think we probably all got to a professional level purely from creating for ourselves. You know what I mean? So it's like, it's easy to lose that. I definitely lost it on my end of things.
The collaborative part that you mentioned, I want to say this is more so like a feeling coming from me because I'm still not, I wouldn't say a veteran in things. I'm like 3.5 years into being a freelance professional, and collaborating can be really tough. And you and I talked about collaboration kind of for yourself being tough because the vision you have your vision and then other people have their own visions, especially in a professional setting or like a more like a commercial setting. I'm sure I feel like that can be where that artistic vision becomes, for me personally, and I feel like I still got to get over this, is, you know, you're working for a client, you're trying to create, you know, help them create their vision, either being photo or video. But at the same time, you're kind of feeling like, you know, if you just kind of let me loose a little bit here, like kind of let my vision jump into this, you guys would be surprised.
Yeah.
Like, what are some, like, how, explain a little bit more about your vision and how you see collaboration with your vision alongside your vision.
Yeah, I think collaboration can look a lot of different ways. And I do think there are times when it can get frustrating because like you see something very clearly that it feels as if the other people you're collaborating with are not seeing at all. And it's like, it's hard to fight that voice in your head that says like, I'm right. You know what I mean? Like people should be listening to me. I think that, you know, you have to understand where your mindset is when you go into collaboration, right? Like I think the best collaborations are when people are very clear on what they're bringing to the table, right? So I, you know, 5-6 years ago when I made this kind of effort to collaborate more, I did it with the mindset of not doing it in a way that would frustrate me, right? Like collaborating with people that had razor sharp, crystal clear vision of what they were trying to do. And I was like, how do I fit into this and help that vision? In those scenarios, you don't get frustrated, right? Because you want to be a part of something that's already been laid out. And it becomes easy to see things from a different perspective, right? Because it's like, hey, I'm going to collaborate with Chris Stanford today. And he has a pretty clear vision of what he's trying to do. Let me let go of me, right? And let me just be a part of his vision and be open to it. You know, that doesn't mean there aren't times where I'm like, oh, like I start getting like thoughts in my head and it's like veering off the tracks, right? But you know, if you think about it, if you're shooting for a client, that is a collaboration, right? So, you know, I think when I talk about collaborating, it was like this idea of like, I don't have to be the star of the show, right? Like it doesn't have to be me, me, me. It's like, let me be a part of something bigger than me. And, you know, I've had issues where I've collabed with people where I've had the crystal clear vision. It was more like my creative. And other people collaborated with me, but like it started getting splintered, right? It's like, oh wait, are we doing your stuff? Because like I laid out what we're trying to do here. Like I was more looking for help, right? So it's tough because you got to be. I think communication's super key when it comes to that, you know. And I think one thing I've learned from working on like bigger motion shoots, you know, I think photographers, including myself, who get into motion or haven't gotten into motion, we look at like the video world as like, why does it have such a big hierarchy, right? Why is it like, no, you know, like in photography, we have roles, but it's like, look, if an assistant, look, whatever, like in motion, you got people who handle electrical, right? And they don't mess with camera. But like in the photo world, we don't understand that, right? It's like I'll jump in on whatever I want to jump in. Like I'll mess with the camera, I'll mess with lights, I'll mess with electrical, I'll mess with the Digitech station. And in motion, it is clearly defined and you do not change your roles. And the more you work in that world, you understand that that is super, super important, right? Because hierarchy is very important in collaboration, right? And I think that's where things can get a little weird for people is if you collaborate and it's like everybody's doing everything, right? It's not going to work. right?
Yeah.
Like there needs to be defined roles in collaboration. And I think that happens before you collaborate, right? That's a
Mm,
email, phone call, whatever. It's like, hey, look, like I know you have a good eye, but I need you to be more of a producer on this, right?
mhm.
Because you're super organized, or like those are the things that can cause pitfalls with collaboration, I think, without clearly defining the roles.
Mhm. No, that's interesting that you laid that out that way, because I definitely see in a photography setting there being these loose boundaries for a lot of people on set, because you can have your first assistant also, I mean, they could be doing three different roles at the same time.
Totally.
Um, I've been on a few video sets and I have seen that kind of clear, like you do that over there, you do that over there thing. What made you switch from, because you of course you have a um exceptional career in photo, but what made you pivot from going from photography to video?
I think I've always been interested in video, but it always felt so hard to get into that it was just more of a background thing,
Mm,
I had messed around with some music videos before the 5D Mark II came out. And I was like, I really like this, like it was fun. Like I did a silly video for Little John back in the day. I did a video for a DJ out of LA named DJ Spider, and had a lot of fun with those videos. But again, it was more of a like just a way to be creative. But what made me ultimately pivot to motion is money, honestly. I've been working in hip hop for so long that whenever the recession happened, when was that, 2008, 9ish,
mhm,
10ish, like really all three of those years were pretty tough for me. I I was just like, the money's not here anymore for music, like it just felt like if I don't pivot to something else photographically, like I don't have a way to sustain financially. Um, and people might be like, well, why don't you go shoot other things with photography? And I think this has changed a lot from then to now. But like back then, I mean, everyone just knew me for who I was, right? Zach, he shoots rappers. Like, what am I gonna go take a year, 2 years and go shoot lifestyle athletic gear? Or what do I pivot to?
mhm.
I knew how long it took for me to build my career in music. I didn't feel like I had the luxury of time to rebuild a whole other career. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Um, this day and age, I feel like it's a lot easier to be like, oh, I'm doing this too, or I'm doing that, right? Like things were slower back then. Now it's like you could take 2 or 3 weeks and go shoot something different and like create a whole new Instagram page and boom, you know what I mean? Like, and people aren't so set in their ways, back back then people would, clients would hit me up, you know, seeing that I had good composition, good lighting, and the calls I would have would be like, yeah, but I don't know if you can shoot this kind of stuff. And I'm like, yes, I can. You know what I mean? Like I'd literally be fighting to convince people that I could, insert different subject matter, insert different background. Like the lighting's good, the composition's good. Like what makes you think that I couldn't do something else? So it felt like my career was at a dead end. And I made an effort to reach out to a bunch of photographers that I knew. And I was like, look, I can add motion to your photo shoots. And that was like something I leaned on a lot of my friends in photography. I'm like, look, please, like I really want to shoot some different stuff, and luckily a few of my friends let me on, and it was small. You know what I mean? It was like me with like homemade PVC rigs from Home Depot that held the camera, made a ring. So like it it was kind of a stabilization thing, and I'm like hand pulling focus, and it was really, down and dirty. But that's how I pivoted. And, you know, I think within a year of like doing that, I landed a couple of clients that paid me pretty well, at least much better than I was doing, you know, a year or two prior. And I just continued to build on it, you know, and yeah, that's how I pivoted from still to motion.
Man, there's something about our industry I see quite often with people like yourself and people who are just really successful. They just know how to DIY shit. Like
Yeah.
DIYing, learning how to just use what you got in order to make it happen is super important.
Sure.
So you have a long career of shooting rappers, mainly in Atlanta, that scene popping, and then you're starting to venture into video, and then you're, as we talked about before, you started to venture into sports a little bit. What brought you into that industry?
I mean, I was always into sports. I grew up in a small town in Iowa, and you know, basically, if you didn't play sports, you didn't exist. So, you know, I've been into sports from a very early age. When I was going to photo school in Colorado, my goal at that time was to be an extreme sports photographer. I got a
Really?
Yeah, I actually worked at Ski Magazine in Boulder for a couple of years and ended up working for a couple of photographers that, you know, were shooting for Thule bike racks, Schwinn bicycles, used to be located out of Boulder. They still might be, I don't know. But then you know, at some point in that process, I realized like I really wanted to shoot music. And, you know, it kind of became an obsession for me. So we know I ended up shooting music and moving to Atlanta. But at some point, basketball really started popping into my head, you know, like, man, I really want to shoot basketball. And I did a couple things a long time ago for and one, the street ball league,
Yeah.
and was really excited about what I got with those photos. And part of the excitement is that league was like heavily influenced by hip hop, right?
Right. Mm-hmm.
And some of the people I shot, you know, I was like, this is like a rapper with a basketball. Like it didn't feel, it felt like the same world for me, right? And
Mm-hmm.
it like I love the energy, you know, like I go to like a practice court for one of these players and like set up a backdrop on the court, play my music as loud as I want, and we're having like a party on the basketball court, which is kind of what my hip hop shooting would be, right? It's like this
Mm-hmm.
high energy, good loud music, you know, people vibing, having a good time, right? So I was like, wow, I want to get some NBA stuff, but you know, again, it just felt like, you know, I have no idea how I get in there, right? So I shot a couple things for Slam. There was another basketball magazine called Dime. It was a really good basketball magazine back in the day. So I got a taste through those outlets, but I never got like big shoots. You know what I mean? Like I did get a shoot Carmelo Anthony for Dime, which was like, you know, really cool. But it kind of like just went away. You know, like I didn't get it. It just, I had a little pop of it for a couple of years, but I just couldn't find a way to like break through that door, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And then at some point in 2014, I believe, like a good friend of mine, Greg Miller, who's an excellent photographer here in Atlanta,
Mm-hmm.
you should have on your podcast.
Absolutely.
He put my name in the pot to be a second shooter with him for the Hawks.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, Not even like second shooter, just more like divide and conquer. Cause like their
Yeah.
shot lists were so crazy. Like it's like home and away jerseys, but like 2 looks per, and there's, you know, however many players are on the Hawks, however many time in the day. It just like one person couldn't do it. Right.
Right. Mm-hmm.
So I got in there and amazing. You know what I mean? Like just like loved it from the beginning, you know, like the energy's high, like you got to give the Atlanta Hawks a lot of props for what they do on these media day shoots, which I'm not sure if it's going to continue based off of COVID. I don't know if they're doing anything this year or not, but yeah, I ended up doing that all the way up to now, minus this upcoming season. I don't know what their plans are for that, but it's, you know, it's did that, and then like, you know, got to know Torian Prince from the Hawks. Done a couple shoots with him outside of the Hawks. I've done quite a few shoots for Slam. I know there's more out there. I just did something for New Era before the pandemic, which unfortunately won't be released. And that was with baseball players. And I'm not sure why it's not being released, but yeah, I mean, like I kind of like had a conscious decision to try to do more sports. And I was like, that's what I'm going to do. Right. Like, and I've kind of relaxed on that because the sports world, man, it's so hard to get into. You know what I mean? Like some people be like, you're already in there, but like, I don't feel like I am. You know what I mean? Like still feel like I'm like tapping on that door. And I think that might be one of the hardest, you know, I don't think it's hard to go get a game pass to shoot a game, right? That's not hard. But when I say getting in there, like you know as well as I know, there's a few select shooters that are like, you know, they're with Kevin Durant on draft day at Kevin Durant's house, or you know, like that's what I'm talking about, right? And that's a small sliver of people, tiny sliver. So yeah, I mean, I've done yeah, I've done a decent amount of basketball.
No, I really like your basketball work, especially like the stuff you recently did with Zion for Slam.
Yeah.
You bring up a good point where like there are these group of photographers now that kind of gravitate around specific players. Like players start to kind of have their like go-to guys, and
Yeah.
I've noticed that happening more and more over the past couple of years, that photographers are getting brought on by the athletes themselves rather than, you know, teams or other outside, you know, publications or businesses or anything like that. The players are starting to kind of see the purpose of their own personal brands more. Somebody I was talking to, do you know who Anthony Geathers is?
Who?
Anthony Geathers.
Yes, I know that name, but
He's up in Brooklyn. He's shot some Slam stuff too, or not Slam, but and one stuff too.
Okay.
But
I know the name's very familiar, and I'm sure I know the work, but I'm having a little bit of a brain lapse.
Oh yeah. I'm sure you've definitely seen his work before. And we were talking about how that world can be. We kind of said like rappers and photographers are actually kind of similar, because it was like you kind of have to go off and do your own thing without the permission of other people to tell you to do it. Like rappers have like labels in the past and stuff like that, and they had to hop on with these labels to go, you know, put their work out there. And now they kind of do it on their own, and they're really successful doing it. And I think photographers are starting to kind of pick up on that model too. Not just photographers, but creative people in general. And they're just kind of hopping on these teams with these different athletes and stuff like that. I think a good time to actually start kind of doing that with athletes is in the off season, like hitting up agents and hitting up, I mean, a DM could, you know, you never know what a DM can get you when it comes to these athletes, because they're on their DMs more than you think.
100%.
So yeah. Yeah. So, you know, to all the people out there that are looking to kind of do that too, I think that's a good kind of, you know, approach, like you kind of did with your photographer friends, like bringing up the video things, like I can add motion to your photo shoots.
Yeah.
You just kind of like offer something. Don't like reach out and be like, can I be your photographer? Just offer something up first, and then kind of see how it goes. They want to see how it goes first, and then you know, that could lead to a whole lot of opportunity later on.
100%. And I mean, I think with basketball players, the one thing that has kind of stood out to me is, you know, if they vibe with you and feel safe with you, when they get that call for Nike, Reebok, whatever, right? Gatorade, they're gonna think of you, right? It doesn't mean Nike's gonna go for it and be like, oh, this basketball player has a photographer, like, and he's basically making us use this photographer. Like, it might work and it may not, but like when it does work, you know what I mean? Like, I think basketball players are probably more loyal than rappers, right? Well, okay. I'm not going to say rappers aren't loyal to photographers because they definitely are, but their world is a lot crazier, right?
You said, I
It's
mentioned the
like,
chaos before.
yeah, the chaos of being a rapper or singer, whatever, an entertainer, right? The lights are so much brighter and so much more appearances. And it's like, I don't, if I was a rapper, I wouldn't be able to keep track of anything either. You know what I mean? Like, if there's 800 amazing photographers trying to shoot me, why would I remember you? But with basketball, I think there's a lot better chance to like get in and like stay in. You know what I mean? Um, and yeah, I mean, what an amazing time,
Right.
hit up some players on the DMs. Like, that's like when kids, really young shooters hit me up and like they state that it's as if they don't know how to like break through, and I'm just like, you have to be kidding me right now. You know what I mean? Like, when I started out, I'd go to Barnes and Nobles and pull out the masthead of magazines and write down email addresses by hand on a piece of paper, go home and fire off emails praying I would get returns. Like, that's a full day of work. Like, you just pull up your phone and you just direct access to anybody. We know, not all messages will be returned or even seen, but oh man,
Yeah.
we're spoiled for access and options this day and age, to where it's almost like limiting to some people, that are starting out, like, because that they don't know the other side of it, which feels like this huge wall that you can't get over, like there's no wall anymore, so it is an incredible time, young or old shooters.
Yeah. Yeah. I think, and to go back to, uh, you mentioned like shooting games and stuff. I think if you want to be more in if you want to be deeper into that world of being a one-on-one with athletes, I wouldn't say working. I mean, you kind of got to know one of the players through working with the Hawks, but from what I've seen, it can be a very tough situation going from working with that team to working with that player, because I've seen a lot of teams starting to bring up these rules of like, if you start communicating with these players outside of, this organization, there's a chance we won't hire you again.
Wow, no kidding.
Yeah, I think it might be this like situation of just kind of like I want to say it's like a power play to me. Yeah. Just to kind of say like, we're the ones that are like bringing you this opportunity, and for you to go outside of us is kind of like, oh, who are you to do that? But I have built relationships with players, working through teams too, and you just kind of at the end of the day kind of be like, well, if you don't want to work with me in the future, this guy does, so I'm sorry. Yeah. No, but no, I think this is my more of like sports industry perspective from things. It can be really weird when it comes to things like that. It feels like there's so many opportunities, especially if you get to work with teams, because you get to network with these players more that are starting to build out their own brands. I mean, you see Kevin Durant and Kyrie and of course LeBron, like all these guys have multi-million-dollar personal brands.
Yeah.
That can definitely bring on these shooters to make stuff for them, but the teams themselves are kind of like seeing that and we're like, all right, well, it's either them or us, kind of. And I feel like teams just need to kind of like let go of that a little bit and start being a little bit more collaborative, you know, because then it starts to make nobody, if that is starts to catch on and become actually more of a thing, like nobody's going to want to shoot for teams.
Yeah, for sure.
And there's already an issue of, you know, like um, pay when it comes to working with teams. There's already an issue with, you know, licensing and image rights and what you can and can't use on your portfolio or post on social. And, you know, I think the players themselves kind of really don't care at this point. So that looks like a more interesting opportunity than working for teams right now.
Yeah, I mean, I think things are changing so quickly that, you know, bigger institutions are always going to be the last to kind of figure it out, you know. Um, I will say my experience with the Atlanta Hawks has been top notch, you know.
Same. Yeah.
I think I don't have much to compare it to, but I just don't know if there's a better sports organization out there in regards to like me, you know, like they've seen me connect with players on shoots and like their eyes light up because I think that's what they want. They want what I want, right? They want that great energy, right? They want the players to feel like it's their shoot and not the Atlanta Hawks shoot for them, right? Like, no, it's like when Trae Young walks on set, it's Trae's shoot, and we're gonna make sure he feels that way, right? Like, we're not gonna tell Trae to do something he doesn't want to do. We're not gonna play music he doesn't want to listen to. We're not gonna make him pose a way he doesn't want to pose. You know what I mean? Like, it is their show, and you know, it sucks to hear that there's other, you know, less progressive, you know, teams out there, but that's not surprising in the least. You know, I won't name another organization, but I have worked with another organization and total opposite. You know, I felt like I was being, God, I don't know. It just was terrible. Let's put this.
I think
I have noticed it.
I think I know what you're kind of going at, and I could be completely wrong, but I kind of look at it from the perspective of, so like when you got hired by the Hawks and, you know, I classify you as kind of like an Atlanta legend in a way because people know who you are, especially in Atlanta. So when people, like, if the Hawks were to bring you in, it's like, okay, Zach knows what he's doing. Yeah. So they're not going to question you, like turning up the music, you know, talking to players a certain way. They're just not going to question you. But me being 3 years in, bringing me on to certain, they're going to be like, okay, here's how we kind of do things. Yeah. You know, you don't really do this, you don't really do that, you know, and I'm not saying it's like always just like this, like just shoot kind of thing. But did you feel like whatever that organization was doing was similar to that, where it's just like, here's how the run of show is, you can't do this, you can't do that, you can't be you can't be an artist in this?
Yeah, no, it very much was that. And the interesting thing is they contacted me, and I think one of the main conversations is we want you and your style and you to be you. And it was like, once we got on set and started shooting, it was like I was micromanaged to the point that I was like, I do believe I had said something to the effect of like, you understand that, you know, in our initial phone call, you said you don't want to, you know, you want me to be me and to do what I do. And like, we were on the streets of Atlanta, like downtown area, and you know, I'm very like spontaneous and free flowing, right? And I remember like they kind of wanted like some street style with some athletes. Hold on, my phone's blown up. And like it's so like, you know, I'm in this parking lot and then I turn over here and I'm shooting here. Like, it's so free flowing. And I remember like I went and flipped and shot a player against like a wrought iron fence, and that there was like a dumpster behind them. And like, you know, someone from the organization was like, what are you doing? Like, I would never use a shot with a dumpster behind it. And I'm like, hey, you might be right. You know what I mean? But like, I'm going to spend 45 seconds here. You know what I mean? Like, this is what I do. Like like I turn the brain off and I'm just being, you know what I mean? Like it's not, I'm not thinking this out, you know? It's 100% energy and spontaneity. And, you know, like stop stopping me. You know what I mean? Like if I do 4 dumpster shots and I just turn the camera a tiny bit to the right and there's like whatever else, that might be the best shot you had all day, you know? But it's like it's separated by 60 seconds. And it became this thing where it was just like, I don't care if I ever get called back from these people. Cause it's like I wasn't getting paid very well, one. Two, it's like if you don't let me be me, then what do I get out of this? You know, like that's something I ask myself all the time, right? Like either need to get paid or I need to make art that I'm proud of. The those two together is like, that's it. You know what I mean? That's the sweet spot. But if I don't get one of those two things, then I don't, it gives me no way to move forward, right? I don't get paid much and I don't get to make art. That doesn't do anything for me. Gone. That's an easy decision. That's an easy buy, you know, until one of those two things changes, that it is of zero benefit to me, you know?
What do you say to organizations that kind of just say like, well, we hired you, like we're the ones paying you, so you have to listen. Like, I'm sure, you know, you haven't necessarily experienced it much to the extent that I've heard it, and a lot of younger creatives have heard it. We're like,
Yeah.
we hired you to do this.
Yeah.
And a lot of these, a lot of the times, one, a professional team or, you know, someone that has that stature, if they're reaching out to you to do work, they see something in your work that they want, or they see something in you that they want.
Yeah.
You know, they're not just going to hire some kid with a camera. Like there's a reason.
Yeah.
But then when they pull you in and then it's like, all right, here's like all these rules, you can't be who you are. It's becoming more of a thing.
So, okay. I would venture to say that it's not a new thing, right? And let me try to like rewind to when I was starting out, because when I was starting out, I definitely went through the same thing. You know what I mean? Like, so when like a record label would give me a chance, you know, I'm going up against seasoned veterans, right? That have been shooting film for 15 years and like they don't make mistakes, right? So the reason why I bring up film is mistakes in film cost money, a lot of money, right? And it you could shoot the whole day, right? Like, so you go to the lab with a Ziploc bag of film, right? What if you tell the lab, what if your assistant that you hired, you entrust them to give that film back to the lab and they tell the lab to do the wrong thing? And I'm bringing that up because I did that as an assistant. And I'm gonna tell you the flack that I got from that, oh my God, like I wish I could remember the photographer's name, but I told them to push process the whole bag of film, which basically gives it higher contrast. And typically what they would do back then was run 1 to 2 rolls, and they call it a clip test. Like in the darkroom, they'd pull out, say, 10% of the roll, actually clip the film and develop it at that +2 as a test. And I remember handing that bag over to the lab and they were like, are you sure? I'm like, oh, I'm sure. Like, that's what I was told to do. Like, push process everything. And they're like, are you sure? Yes, I'm sure. Man, the call that I got, unbelievable. Anyways, I messed that up big time. But I'm bringing up that story that, you know, when you start, you know, respect needs to be earned, right? And that's what we're talking about right now. So like my advice to some younger shooters out there that may have, you know, created a buzz around themselves via social media. And what I would challenge younger shooters to do in this situation when you've created this buzz, right? So let's say you got 10,000 followers on Instagram. Here's the problem with that. And I'm not going to say that this applies to everyone in every situation, but this is something that I think I have observed is I have, 7 some thousand followers, right? So somebody who's 23 years old has 10,000 followers, and then they see me, I'm like the old head at this point, and they're like, like I got it better than Zach, right? Like I'm more, I'm more now than Zach, right? And I'm not talking technical here, right? It's more about the voice in the younger shooter's head that might be artificially influenced by their following. And then what happens? Samsung calls, hey, we want you to shoot some kids out in the street like you do, but like let's put a cell phone in their hand. And then what happens? We need to make sure the phone's like this, like tilt the phone because there's a reflection on it. I need to see the logo. And what ends up happening to that younger shooter, they're like, I don't, this is not what I do. It's like, no, it's not. But this is what you're being hired to do. So what ends up happening in this beginning part of your career is like your ego's your biggest enemy, right? And like what we're talking about here is an ego situation, right? And you have to quell your ego. You have to sit back and talk to yourself and say, well, what exactly is happening right here? So if we want to just shoot kids in the street looking cool and put a visco filter on it, what is the market for that, right? Well, the market for that is nothing unless we insert product. Nothing. There is no market. You know what I mean? It's either needs to be Adidas shoes, a hoodie, necklace, earrings, hats, phones, jackets. And in any of those situations, you have to give your client something that reads on that product, but feels exactly like you weren't shooting for a product when you were out on a Sunday and the sun was perfect in an alleyway downtown Atlanta, and you shot this girl that, has 100,000 followers on Instagram. So, you know what I mean? Like it becomes this thing where that is one of the hardest parts of like starting your career is like, am I being micromanaged or am I learning how to be a professional? You know what I mean? And I think that's an important thing to differentiate on, And I think what you were saying is like sometimes like people hire you and it ends up feeling like they won't let you be you. But I had to go through this. Everyone has to go through this, right? So the sweet spot is getting past that period where it feels as if you're being micromanaged and understanding that you have to go through that, right? So what I would tell myself if I was a younger shooter in that situation, the voice in my head would be like, I need to learn how to navigate this. And the only way I learn how to navigate this is by doing it over and over and over again. At some point, you get a little swagger in your step. You know how to communicate better. You know how to like communicate with your clients before the shoot. Hey, look, like, we've been doing this for a while and like, I know what you want. But like when we're on set, if you could give me a little more freedom here and trust that I know what you want the end result to be, but if you could give me a little bit of wiggle room to get there. So I'm asking for your trust. But like, if you are popping on Instagram, but haven't actually shot something commercially, I don't, how is a big corporation going to trust you without anything to grab onto? You know what I mean? So I don't think this is new. I think this is just part of what, getting your footing feels like. And I think we've all gone through it. And it just takes a little bit of time to get there. And at some point, what you're saying, you might get to a place where you're like, do I want to do this? You know, I think that's something that can happen too, where it's like,
Oh yeah.
I thought this is what I wanted to do, but like I have to deal with all this other stuff, and this may not actually be what I want to do, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's man, I think that's been me the past month or so,
Yeah.
because it's not so much that work is so down, because of course it's COVID, so it's like you can't say that's the reason. Um, I think one of the biggest things for me, and I know it's going to come out, I think it kind of did come out when I was asking you or telling you that story before, was the ego thing. Like you hit the nail on the head with that. I think that is an issue in our industry. I mean, a lot of industry shit, but like thinking to ours, and specifically myself, like I have definitely had that happen to where like you kind of get like afterwards, you're like, who did you think you were? You know?
Yeah. Man,
and
it's so hard.
and then it makes like with a person like myself, um, I think from my past, you know, getting told you're wrong, or just getting, you know, vocally just like, what the fuck was that? Like just like being told that like that, you internally beat yourself up. You like, people don't really at that point have to tell you you did something wrong. You eat it, and it just makes you feel like a piece of shit at the end of the day.
Yeah.
For me, I mean, it can last for like a month. And it's not so much that I just want to get past it, as much as like I feel like I need to start shifting my direction a little bit more
Yeah.
into things that are more conducive of being helpful, being less about myself. Um, this podcast has definitely helped that. Just conversations like the pre-interviews that I have with people are amazing, because we both feel like it's definitely not recorded, so we can be completely honest. And I feel like in a way I'm helping, like with the conversation, like people are starting to tell me things that they've probably not told people about their careers and lives. And I'm happy to, you know, listen and be there for a lot of these people. Um, have you ever felt like what was the thing that really helped you get over? Did you feel like you had an ego at the beginning of your career?
I mean, I still do. I
Yeah.
mean, don't get it twisted. Like, you know, some people might listen to this and be like, oh, you still got a ways to go, buddy. You know, like, I mean, it's it's a continual effort, right? Like at the end of the day, I started doing this from the very beginning when I was 16 as like a form of therapy, you know, honestly, you know, I didn't know that at the time, but looking at it now, you know, I didn't feel like I belonged where I grew up at all. And photo became like this great escape for me, right? So I'm so personally attached to it, right?
Mm-hmm.
So personally attached to what I make with my camera. That's what the ego is in regards to this conversation, right?
Yeah.
It's like you're in your own little world, creating your own little fantasy in your head, and everyone's gonna love what I'm doing. There's gonna be no resistance. Everything's gonna be perfect. And what we're talking about is resistance, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
you're going to have resistance. The question is, can you shut the fuck up and take it and relax and breathe and make a compromise or not? Trust me, there's many instances where I did not compromise. Plenty, hundreds, right? More when I was younger. You couldn't tell me anything. You know what I mean? Like I'm Zach Wolfe. Like you're gonna you're gonna follow my lead, or we have a problem. It's not a good place to be. You know what I mean? And I don't care how big of a shooter you are. Like I think a little humility goes a long way, right? And I think something that helps me when I'm in these situations is let me get through this the best way I can, with being the best person I can be, being the most creative I can be with whatever constraints are set on me, and go home, breathe, relax, meditate on if this was a good fit or not. And if it's not, dig up something that is, you know what I mean? Like
Mm.
it's it it's easy to be like, oh, I'm gonna shake this up and make it what's good for me. And it's like, I think one of the biggest things I've learned through doing this long enough is like, if it's not working, it's not working. Fine. You know what I mean? Like you have to use the creativity that got you to this point to also be creative in finding something else, you know? I think that's one thing, you know, I've been pretty good at over the years is reevaluating me and my career and like who I'm working with and what works for me and what doesn't work for me. It changes every couple of years, you know, even if like my work kind of feels like it stayed in the same lane, what's going on my head changes constantly. You know what I mean? Like I said with this music video stuff, right? Like I've turned down so many music video jobs over the last 10 years because for me, it wasn't emotionally healthy for me.
Mm-hmm.
Because that is the ultimate test in destroying your ego, right? Your ego is going to be destroyed every 3 minutes for 14 hours straight. It is challenging, right? Like you think you have a good idea. No, you've got a plan in motion and it gets completely unraveled. I mean, really, that's the biggest thing that happens on music video sets is like you have a plan of action, maybe technically and artistically, and it gets unraveled and it just continues and continues and continues. And, you know, this idea of control is something that is laughable, right? And it's a hell of an exercise in, you know, killing the ego. You know what I mean? Like, so for me, you know, maybe it's taken all this time for me to be emotionally healthy enough to actually jump into that. You know what I mean? Which is crazy. I'm 43, right? It's like, um, some people have that figured out at 25, you know, it's just, it's different for everybody. But, yeah, I still have an ego. I still have to check myself every single day, you know?
Do you feel like you had I'm sure you had some mentors coming up into your career. Do you feel like they kind of played a part of that as well? Because you're learning from these people that you have so much respect for, and you almost kind of start to emulate their moods and their emotions sometimes.
100%. I mean, when I talk about collaborating, like really what I'm talking about is working with people I consider mentors, you know? Um, when I was a photo assistant, I worked for so many different shooters and like every style of photographer. I started working with architecture photographer out of Boulder, Colorado. That was like so rigid. I mean, he is the definition of rigid, you know, like there was one way to do it and that was his way. There is never, ever going to be a moment where I could interject anything in my head into this man's system. None. Like we light this way, we load the film cartridges this way, we mark the film cartridges this way, we write down in a notebook in a very specific way, you know, the log for the film cartridges. I mean, this was as rigid as it got. And then I've worked with like a French fashion photographer, right? Which is like the exact opposite. I've worked with every style of photographer you could imagine over a 7-year period. So my background was so rich. And when that went away, it felt like I lost something. You know what I mean? Like I loved being thrown all around the place with like different styles of shooting, different mentalities and all that, right? So when I talk about collaborating, it's as if, you know, my old mentors, which were photographers that I worked for, sometimes once, sometimes several times, it kind of collaborating with other shooters is a continuation of that. I can't stand staying in one spot, you know, and I don't mean like physically or literally, but like doing the same thing over and over again is exactly, you know, why I became a photographer, because I cannot stand doing the same thing over and over again, you know. So yeah, I mean, all these people I collaborate with, they are mentors to me. Like, I hope I never get to the place where I feel like I can't have a mentor. You know what I mean? Like, I hope I'm 80 years old and somebody's a mentor to me, and that person could be 40 years old at that point. You know what I mean? Age doesn't matter. It's a mentor to me is someone who offers me a new way to look at things that I can't do on my own. And I'm always seeking that. And will always seek it till the day I die.
Do you feel like that's harder to do as you get older?
Um, I think it can be, if you don't try to think about it. You know what I mean? Like, if you go 20 years without thinking that someone else could possibly enlighten you, I'm not going to say it's too late, but yeah, it's definitely going to be hard, right? I think that's, you know, maybe one of my best skills is the ability to get excited for what other people are doing and losing my ego to where it's like, hey, like, I would love to be around and contribute and just let what you bring to the table rub off on me. You know what I mean? Like, I love that. And even when I don't love it, you know, like, I've collabed with people far younger than me that I'm like, I may never be as talented as you. And not being afraid to feel that is a strength, in my opinion, right? It's like, we want to run away from being reminded that someone's probably more talented than you, right? I run into that. Like, come on, man. Like, show me that I'm not as good as you. Like, there's only one way I could get closer to your talent, and that is forgetting, like, letting go of the emotion that comes with, I'm not as good as you. Like, nah, like, give me more of that. You know what I mean? And I try to run to things that are harder, right? Like, if you're uncomfortable, you're learning. If you're uncomfortable, you're growing. You know what I mean? Like, I run towards uncomfortability. Um, so much so I have to force myself to have a break from that, you know, because, like, sometimes it's just like, okay, cool. I've had enough of that for a little bit. Let me get comfortable again for a little bit, you know, like, so it's a process, but it is not easy, but I think it's essential, you know?
Oh yeah. That's a part of this podcast is getting over some of that too, because I guess I'm still kind of in that phase of like still kind of open to assisting and things like that and being open-minded. And yet when you're like, going back to what you said about assisting different types of people, you know, one thing I always did assisting was like at the very beginning, be like, do you like for me to kind of step in and say, or like help you see certain things on set? Like, do you mind taking, you know, do you mind listening to my point of view on something? And you have people who are like, yeah, sure. Like, you know, I don't understand this subject as much and you may know more about it and I'd be happy to hear it. And then you have people who are like, just set up the lights. I'll take care of everything else. Yeah. And you always kind of hope that you run into the other person most of the time because you feel like you're contributing more, I guess. But in conversations, this form of things, I was always timid because when someone kind of intimidated me, I was quiet. Like, if you ask a lot of the people that I shoot for, I'm sure you've kind of run into this too in a way. You're a fly on the wall. You're just trying to kind of grow that awareness in the situation so that, you know, you start to see things that a lot of other people in that area are not seeing. And then, I don't know, that kind of grew into being a little timid actually, because the quieter you get, I feel like when you actually speak up, people are like, what? Like, nah, go back to that thing. Go back to the being quiet part. So there's definitely people I've there's people I've asked to be on this podcast that I was super fucking scared to ask to do it. Super scared to have the conversation with, because for me, I always felt like to them I was the quiet person, and now I'm the person asking them a bunch of questions. And I recently asked somebody, actually not too long ago, I was so nervous to ask this dude to be on the podcast, because my dealings with him in the past were like, well, out of a lot of respect, listen to him, but he is like, it's his way.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know, like something more I did this, I felt like I needed to ask him out of anybody, because I felt like I needed to kind of break the mold. Like you said, run into that uncomfortable feeling and maybe dig deeper and see if they'd be willing to kind of explain why they are that way.
Yeah.
Just to kind of get their perspective on it, just so that I know that it's not all I'm feeling. It's like they are that way because of this. Yeah, there's something to be said about running into an uncomfortable situation that it really helps propel you and help you grow. And I'm hoping that works with this more and more, because there are questions I always want to ask that I always feel scared to ask. But the more I study this kind of thing, the deeper the questions are, the conversation gets so much better. And I don't need alcohol to kind of get me past that point. So
Yeah. Yeah, I think what you're talking about, something sparked in my head is like, you know, I definitely think I've been that person, right? Like, you know, I've definitely intimidated people who have worked for me on set that haven't, you know, maybe it's the first time they've worked with me. And it kind of depends on the shoot, but I will say, you know, just speaking about me, but I think it's in regards to other people that can feel intimidating. And I think for me, you might have valid points, but one thing people need to understand if you're assisting another shooter, whether it's photo, video, whatever, a lot of times when people are like that, what you don't know is all that they're dealing with, right? You weren't on the 300 emails, right? You weren't on the 25 Zoom calls. You weren't on whatever, right? So it's like your, you know, fun little idea, you know, I might be very stern and be like, dude, shut the fuck up. Like, I ain't got time for your ideas right now. And you might be like, oh my God, Zach's a dick. It's like, no, Zach is not a dick. Zach has crazy pressure on his shoulders, has, you know, hundreds and hundreds of correspondence with said client, and knows what he needs to do more than anybody else on this set. And sometimes that's an ego thing too, right? Like you're an assistant, you're like, oh, that hurts. Like, it's like, yeah, it's not your place, dude. It's not your job.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if I'm on a loosey-goosey shoot for Slam, talk. Give me all the ideas you got, right? So it kind of depends on what it is. You know what I mean? But typically, from what I've found, because I deal with this today, right? There are people I work with that I'm like, hey, like, what if we, and they're like, dude, stop. And I'm like, ooh, that hurts. Like, how come you don't want to listen to me? And it's like, I have to like stop and be like, oh, like, I'm just walking into this today. This is day one for me. You know, some of these bigger jobs can go for a month long in pre-production. A month. You literally do nothing but do pre-pro. You know, like I shot for Google during COVID, and we did 2 months of pre-production. You know, and a couple of my assistants on that shoot, you know, I probably had a moment or two with them where it's like, you know, hey, look, seriously, just do what I say. And it always sucks to do that, right? But like I have a Google folder here, and it is massive. I mean, multiple times a day, Zoom calls for 2 months straight for a 3-day photo shoot. It's like, you want to talk about particular? I mean, we did probably 5 Zoom calls about positionings of the phone, because they're like, are you sure you understand how we need the phone to be shot? I'm like, I'm sure. But like, that a lot of people say that, and like they turn the phone just a little bit like this and it doesn't look good like that. And I'm like, whew. I was like, okay, cool. Like, I mean, we're just guessing right now, right? We're all guessing. If my guess says it'll be okay. It ended up being totally fine, but like, you know, the nerves I had walking onto that set, I may not have ever had nerves of that level, because I'm like, you know, the night before the shoot, I'm in my hotel room. I'm like, oh man, if I'm like 3 millimeters off on this phone position, like it's like, what if they fire me? What if I don't get paid? I just spent 2 months on Zoom calls. You know, like this is the chatter going on in my head, you know. So in those situations, the 23-year-old kid from San Francisco that was my photo assist, you know, I had to like sit him down and be like, listen, like, I'd love to rock with you in a different way, but like, you are going to have to just follow my lead on this. And please do not interject anything, because it's not even me at this point. You know what I mean? Like, that's a perfect example of a shoot that I didn't get to be me, even though another classic example of like, we want you to be you, right? And it didn't end up being that way. And I can't even really talk smack about it, because it's like, think about it, it's Google. Like, they know what they need, right? Like, am I gonna teach Google something new? Like, they're Google. They know what they need. They know what works. You know, I'm a cog in the wheel at that point. Okay, cool. All right. I mean, it pays well. And maybe after I do one of these, you know, maybe the trust level's 25% more. Maybe that gives me 25% to interject me. You know what I mean? But like, I'm not going to get that out the gate. You know what I mean? So it's definitely understandable to, you know, when you work with someone that's very focused and, you know, can come across as rigid, there's typically a backstory to that you have no idea about, you know. So, you know, I understand that feeling, man. It's I still get intimidated by people all the time, and I think you need to embrace that feeling. You know what I mean? That's a good feeling, right? It's the universe is telling you something you should be paying attention to, I think, you know.
I didn't look at it that way, in a way, like the universe kind of, yeah, I'm just now starting to be a little bit more spiritual again, I guess, and using the universe as a means to like explain certain like random events or things happening and what the meaning of all that is, because no, that's a good point. And I think that's what's helped us spark a lot of conversation, is like, okay, let's handle this, like you said, like, let's handle this in the moment. I'll do what you say, but I would love to hear, you know, what's going on.
Yeah.
And I guess it's cool. It's cool to see more and more, because you hear all the time about, I guess, the older generation of photographers being so, like, I'm sure you've come across this too, where you just get these people that are like kind of abusive in a way, with like just how they approach things on set.
Yeah.
And I think we're starting to kind of venture away from that and be a little bit more open and understanding of, like you said, like the conversation we're having didn't happen 20 years ago.
Yeah.
Like nobody's explaining what, like, how they're feeling on set. And doing things like this kind of help you understand, like, okay, like I definitely respect that, and I need to just be on point so that it helps actually you not stress more than you already are about the situation.
Very big point, right? That if you are being hired to help a director or a photographer, recognizing if you are adding to their pile of stress or deleting is so paramount, right? If you feel like you're getting clapped back on by a shooter, it's them saying to you, you are making my life harder. And the only reason you are here is to make my life easier. Such a huge misconception for assistants in photography, right? It's like, you are here to lighten my load. if you are here on an intel experiment and it's all about you, you got some bad karma coming your way. I don't mean you're going to get hit by a car or something like that. What I mean is like, you know, you have to be aware of that, right?
Yeah.
You need to subtract, not add, right? That is the job of whoever is working under the top. You are here to subtract, not to add. And it's, trust me, I've worked with photographers when I was young, and I'm just like, oh my God, I love this shoot that you did. Like, tell me about, you know, just like all over the place, excited. And it's like, I just made their life harder. It's like, and I needed to go get that beauty dish and put it up over here and set the power to this and shut the fuck up. It's like, oh, okay. You know, like,
Yeah.
it's I've been the other person too. You know, back in the day, you know, I know for a fact people, you know, were scared of me and, you know, still to this day talk about me as if I'm extremely hard to work for. And it's, I'll tell you, times have changed and that's a good thing. You know what I mean? Like I came up under really hardcore New York photographers and LA photographers. And it was just like the pressure was insane. You know what I mean? And it was like, you know, I remember I worked for this woman out of New York. She was one of my favorite shooters. And you know, she would always bring down 2 New York assistants and then I would be the third, but I was just basically a PA. And like, but it was like, you know, I'd tell this woman, like, I know how to light. Like, I know I can do a setup. And like, I challenged her one time. I was like, can you just let me set up one setup? Can I run point? And she let me. And, you know, this is back in film days. And I handed her a Polaroid and she was like, let's go right now. And like we were shooting Terrell Owens, the football player, went in there, shot one Polaroid. I think she let me shoot the first Polaroid, which was kind of common when you were a first assistant, like just so she knew what she was walking into. And she was like, that's it, you're in. And like, I was like, oh, okay. And like, from then on, like I was her first when she came to Atlanta, you know? And like, I recognize, like, I see how you do things and I can take this off your plate. You don't need to spend extra money bringing people down here. Like I'll run point and I'm going to give you exactly what you asked for. You know what I mean? And that's what freaked her out was like, you know, she just really quickly gave me some instructions on lighting and I went and nailed it in like 15 minutes by myself. Like I had no stand in or anything. And like, that was a subtraction, you know? And then it was like, boom, I need to have you, you know, and like, that's kind of if you're looking to assist, which I highly, I cannot say it enough if you're a photographer starting out. I don't care if you have 100,000 followers on Instagram. Swallow your pride and work for other people. I am not the old dinosaur that thinks that and that's not relevant anymore. No, it's still relevant. And I would bet you $1,000,000 the young shooters that embrace that will be the people we talk about in 20 years, you know? I think I just went off on a tangent there, but
No, it's totally fine. We're welcome to tangents on here now. I think it's funny that you keep bringing up the Instagram follower thing. I keep thinking of this show that you know who Nigel Barker is, right?
Nigel Barker?
Mm-hmm. He was a fashion photographer in New York. He was on like American Next Top Model as their photographer for a lot of seasons and stuff. He had a show on YouTube. It was like America's Next or America's Top Photographer or something like that. And they had like 6 or 7 photographers from around the country with different experiences and stuff. And one was, can't remember his name off the top of my head right now, but he had like 500,000 followers on Instagram, really well known for his like lifestyle and just what a lot of people say is that Instagram look.
Yeah.
And the first thing that they ended up doing was a studio shoot.
Yeah.
And watching, it's Andrew Kearns. It was Andrew Kearns that did it. And Andrew struggled with that studio setup. Like literally, like I remember watching him try to shoot it. And I'm just like, oh, he's on live, he's like on TV, like millions of people are watching this. Like he is struggling.
Yeah.
And you know, the photos came out and it was like, ugh. And then he's explaining like, oh, this is how I normally do things. Like I do this, like, you know, just trying to sell himself. So he kind of gets out of like the shit that's about to be given to him. And I feel like that's huge. Like you mentioned, like assisting people kind of helps you in moments like that you're unfamiliar with. You can kind of always also go back and be like, okay, I helped this person out on this one shoot. I didn't know what the fuck I was doing. They kind of showed me how to set up these lights. Okay. And then you kind of do your own thing when that time comes for you, and you can adjust it however you need to for your own personal thing, whatever. Assisting can be huge, especially for people who get thrown into situations that they're not comfortable with, or they're because a lot of times we take on things that we can't really do, but we do it because we want the work, or we want the job or stuff like that.
Yeah. I mean, I don't want to be I want to clarify something real quick. There's nothing wrong with Instagram. It is a huge tool for me, and nothing against somebody who has a big following on Instagram as a photographer. I definitely am not, I don't want to come across as saying that is like a false sense of accomplishment or security or whatever. Like, I guess what, let me hone this in a little bit so people understand where I'm coming from on this. Is really what I'm talking about is, let's say someone under 30 years old who really only has experience being successful on Instagram, and money hasn't really been exchanged except maybe through a direct person contacting you, maybe giving you $500, $1,000 to shoot them or whatever, right? Non-client type work. So when I'm saying assist, and when I'm saying Instagram can artificially inflate you, I'm talking in regards to commercial photography for brands, corporations, right?
Mm-hmm.
I've seen it time and time again, and that's what you're talking about with this TV show, is how would anybody know how to jump into a shoot for a big brand and how to handle that pressure? How would anybody? So that's what affords you the experience by assisting, is you can make mistakes on somebody else's set. And you know what? You don't, you get to live to shoot another day, right? You get that first chance and you're the pop-in Instagram photographer and you shoot for a big brand and you fail. I'm not going to say it's over, but it's a lot worse position to be in than assisting and like handing the lab the wrong bag of film like I did back then, right? Like I did a lot of mistakes as an assistant, but it never like varied my career. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, this is the problem, I think, with a lot of the younger Instagram influencer photographers is, well, this could be a really long conversation. Let me try to not make it a long conversation. I think that there's probably some people who don't need a monetary return for their Instagram following. They may have grown up with money. They may have money coming from other places. And for those who do need a camera to create income for them, it becomes a really hard world to navigate in your head, right? It's like a lot of these Instagram shooters probably they're financially taken care of, so they can be footloose and fancy free and like just have this air about them that is very attractive, right? Where other people are trying to play that role, but like are living in a studio apartment and are scared if they can pay rent the next month, right? Mm-hmm. So that has made it harder, right? And if that big Instagram shooter gets a big commercial thing and it doesn't work out the way they hoped it would, their world's not over. You know what I mean? So it becomes this very complicated thing where it's like, what's real, what's not real? And, I'm purely talking about the route of becoming a successful commercial photographer and the pressures that come with that. And I do think Instagram has confused a lot of people, myself included, you know. But I do think that there's still, you know, benefit to assisting, benefit to really honing your craft and being prepared for the pressure.
Absolutely.
Probably got you enough at this point, right?
Oh no, dude. I want some of these conversations to be, I know you mentioned like I'm sure you got shit that you got to do, but I'm totally welcome for these conversations to last as long as they need to be. Yeah, I just kind of want to, I know you got stuff you got to get done today probably, and you got a family to take care of. So we'll kind of wrap it up so you can kind of get off to doing those things. But
I do another 15, 20 minutes and then I definitely got to get on to some other things.
Sounds good. So I think one question that I did actually end up wanting to ask you that I thought of earlier this morning was, you and I both are we've been in the freelance world. Of course, you longer than I have. Has there ever come a time where I've always had the question of doing a staff job because it's reliable. You know, there's benefits, you just know when you're making money. Has that ever come up for you, and what was your thought around that?
I've been offered full-time jobs several times over my career, and a couple times came close to doing it. One in particular was Electronic Arts, the video game company. I did a lot of content for them, like around 2010, 2011. This is when I was starting my video career. Like, I had like a blog where I posted a bunch of videos that I was doing, and somehow they found me and wanted me to do that style for them, which blew my mind, right? And a couple of years in of creating content for them, they flew me out to SF and essentially like to kind of wine and dine me to convince me to work for them full time. And like, I was going to do it because it was like, they were going to let me be me and like probably get paid more than I was getting on a freelance basis. But I ended up getting contacted by TI's manager, like within hours of being out in San Francisco. And like, he convinced me to leave this whining and dining to come back to Atlanta to shoot 7 videos for TI. And I was like, I probably would have done it if it wasn't for that phone call. I know I would have done it, but that was the only one I considered. Like, I've been offered several times by companies that I work for. And I think it's, for me, the EA one was the only one I considered. I think now, I think it's coming up more and more than ever now, because it's shifting to where companies are like, well, you know, 10 years ago, we would shoot twice a year and that would fulfill all our needs. But we need somebody, like if a custom shirt comes in, we want to shoot it on an employee right now. And that's where a full timer comes in, right? Where, you know, people need to be alive on the internet 24/7, right? And if they're hiring people on a freelance basis, like, it becomes just too expensive. So I think the opportunities for full time are probably at the highest level they've ever been. But I would almost look at it like you're almost like permalance, I think is the term, right? Because I guess if you're going to take one of those full-time gigs, I would almost maybe approach it from like a contract standpoint, because I would be scared that these companies would want to move on to someone else after a year, right? And you might want to move on after a year. So I think I've been offered it. For me, I'm far enough along. I don't think I would ever accept one of those. But being younger, like if I was younger right now in this era, I would probably consider it, but more from a like, hey, let's do a 9-month contract, right? You owe me X amount of days for the next 9 months for X amount of money, which is kind of a hybrid, right? And I think that's becoming more common as well too. So you know, it's an interesting thing. It's definitely, it's tough when you're freelance. It's like, ooh, like money, benefits, you know, like there are plenty of jobs I do. It takes 90 days to get paid, sometimes longer, you know. We could do a whole podcast talking about money and, you know, highly advise people to learn the art of saving. It is the number one way to survive as a freelancer. So when these full-time offers come to you that are only good for a financial benefit, but nothing else, you have a little bit of strength to say no, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, and that's not to say a full-time job is something someone shouldn't do, you know? If you are obsessed with NBA basketball and the Atlanta Hawks want to hire you full-time, you should do it, right? Um, I have too many varied interests that I can do on a freelance basis that, you know, I don't really see a full-time job for me that would like satisfy all the various interests I have.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I have seen it more and more in sports. A lot of teams are starting to, that were once just hiring contractors to do things. They're bringing on staffers uh, to do all that work. And it is hard to, because the financial insecurity side of things definitely starts to be a big play, especially in my mind. Because having a family and stuff like that is all I want to think about now. It's not so much chasing the next biggest and greatest job. It's like, okay, how can I take care of them? And
Yeah.
go ahead.
I was just thinking about something that could be, you know, my little bit of advice for the financial insecurity besides saving. And this is something that is probably even less sexy of an option nowadays than ever. But don't discount the idea of like making an alter ego, right? Your alter ego does not have to have a different name. You don't have to have, you know, what I'm getting at is this. You know, people talk shit about wedding photographers or family portrait photographers or whatever. Insert, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I think wedding photography has turned into a whole creative thing that is, you know, maybe that is not relevant anymore, right? Like wedding photography used to kind of be I wouldn't say the joke of the industry, but it's like it's kind of where you go to have your creative ideas die. That is not the case
Yeah.
anymore. But what
Sure.
I'm trying to get at is this. One thing I also think I can attribute to my longevity is I haven't been scared to work in the background and make money, right? This is a huge mistake a lot of young shooters do, right? It's like, I have my shining star, and if I don't get paid from that, I'm a failure. Stop. One thing that will help you with your big dreams with the camera would be doing things you are less passionate about, but give you financial security. You can do it at the same time. I still to this day do this. Do you know how many jobs I do? You will never see. A lot. I would say over 50% of the jobs I do, no one will ever see, right? Like, and what that does is if you can get financial security with the camera, you're staying in practice, right? And if you don't have an emotional attachment to it, then there's less emotions with it, if that makes sense, right? It's
Mm-hmm.
your emotions get flared up when you're super passionate about something, right?
Right.
If you're not passionate about something, but still want to work in this industry and make a paycheck, like I do jobs I'm not so-called passionate about, but I still have passion behind creating a quality product, right?
Yeah.
And so I do jobs that pay well, but like I'm not going to put on my website. I'm not going to put on Instagram. But like what that does is I put a little money in my pocket, and on the weekend, I go do whatever I want with the camera, and it's so beautiful, right? Because it's like, I don't need to get paid to do this, right? So for instance, 10 years ago when Slam would hit me up and they'd be like, you know, we only have whatever, not enough money. Let's put it that way, right? They still don't have enough money. They never have enough money. When you have no money, that $1,000 budget, you're like, I'm gonna squeeze 750 out of it. You know what I mean? It's like, so you're spending 250 on a photo shoot. What do you think you're gonna get out of that? Not much, right? Now, Slim says, I got $1,000 because I do jobs that pay me well, that I don't have a huge emotional attachment to creatively. I can go do Slam, and they say I got $1,000. I'm gonna be like, I'm probably gonna put another $500 of my own money into that, right? Which is what I just did with the Zion Williamson shoot I just did. I put some of my own money into that. If I was financially insecure, I would never do that. I wouldn't have even done the job because I had to go to New Orleans on my own dime. I had to fund everything. And then I got like 70% of that budget back from them, right? You can make those kind of moves. So like I'm on set shooting Zion Williamson for Slam, not worried about money, right? I'm not saying I'm rich, but like I knew that I didn't need to make money on this shoot. And that when you carry that feeling on set, it's a whole nother ballgame, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you have financial insecurity and you're counting dollars on set, it's not where you want your head to be, right?
Right.
So if you need to like shoot some senior photos on the weekends quietly with a company name, right? Senior Pictures, Georgia, right? Do it.
Yeah.
You got $5,000 in your bank account clean, all your bills are paid, you're gonna move different, right? So big advice to people, right? Don't be scared to go shoot at a catalog house. Don't be scared to assist. Don't like if you have this huge desire in your head and like you have to keep visualizing what it is you want to be and what that looks like, what that feels like, right? If you don't lose sight of that, you can do some other things if you know it's feeding that dream, right? I used to mow lawns, bar back, bus tables, valet. I valeted. This is how I became a photographer, was parking cars. Parking cars.
Really?
To this day, I would highly advise a photographer to park cars. I know that just went against what I said, like work with the camera, but like I would park cars. There were nights I'd make $500 cash. You know what I do with that? I go buy $500 worth of film and on Saturday find a rapper to shoot and shoot the shit out of it, right? Rinse and repeat. Every time I parked a car, I'd be like, that's one roll of film. Boom, boom, parked another car. It's another roll of film. Like that's how I thought, right? It's like, who cares if I'm parking cars? I'm about to go shoot whoever this weekend. And it's one car closer to my dreams. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So
I think
don't feel like all your money has to be made with the camera in the beginning, you know, because it doesn't. Preferably it would, just because it's like if you fall out of practice with the camera, it happens so quick. If you go 6 months and don't shoot, you might as well be starting from the beginning, literally. And that would go from me right now. If I stopped shooting for 6 months, I would be starting from square one. Obviously, I'd have some things in my head that someone else may not, but you know, there's a physical memory, muscle memory, you know. Anyways, I'm rambling right now, but yeah.
dude, totally fine. No, I think it's not only interesting to bring that up in the because I kind of did the same thing, especially at the beginning. I was still in Valdosta working at the restaurant job that I had, you know, waiting tables and stuff. Even when I moved here, I would go down to Valdosta and work weekends sometimes to make money, to just have money to do shit here.
Yeah.
No, but I think we do lose sight of that because I think then the ego kind of starts to play in a little bit, and you're like, well, I'm doing all this amazing work now, and to kind of go back and do things like that is, it's like, you kind of feel like you're scared that you're going to lose that touch that you already started to establish. And I think a big thing to think about now too is COVID, when that started. I mean, I heard a lot of photographers, like, when they lost work, really start considering like working at, supermarkets and going back to waiting tables and stuff. And these are people who have careers
Yeah.
in the industry, talking about doing the normal stuff again. And that, it can, if you take a lot of pride in what you do, it can really hurt that feeling of like, well, am I really a photographer if I'm having to go back to this? I mean, the wedding industry too went away for a little while. So it's like you couldn't really even do the, the things that you don't really put on your portfolio. I still, at this point in my, I get emails every day because I almost signed up to work at Kroger. I still get those emails every day, and it kind of, now it's like this like thing that kind of motivates you to kind of like do better each time in my business. But man, it's there, and it's just kind of like, do you kind of advise people, if they need to do it, take that on?
Yeah, man. I mean, look, this is a conversation for people who don't have someone taking care of them financially in some way, right? Which is my story. Sounds like it's your story, right?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
this isn't for everybody, but you know, it's this idea. I think what I'm really trying to say right now is, if you're broke, you act broke, you move broke. Does that make sense? You
Yeah,
know,
yeah. Mm-hmm.
like, so by any means, don't be broke, And I'm not saying like money's everything, but right, there is that study out there that like, you know, does money make happiness? And there's a very definitive study that says in America, it seems that once you start making $70,000, that $70,000 mark is the mark. Once you make more than that, typically your happiness does not go up. But below 70,000, you feel money. And I believe that fully.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And what they say is, if you make less than $70,000 in America on average, you go to bed at night like, I might be able to go on a vacation this year. I might be able to, like, you're making just enough to pay the bills and have a roof over your head and nothing else, right? And this is obviously a generalization, but
Right.
we're a creative field. We are, we are supposed to interject life into people and brands. That is our job, right? We are supposed to have an energy that is of hope and of fun and blah, blah, blah. If you are broke, right? Like, and I'm talking broke. I have been broke, like as broke as you can get, in debt up to my eyeballs, no way out, right? Like, you move differently, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so, yes, I don't, I would never, if you came up to me and was like, man, I took a job at Kroger, I'd be like, well, you're not giving up on photo, right? And if you told me you weren't giving up on photo, I'm like, cool, man, go get some money, like that's the cool thing about what we do, is it's not like if you're an NFL player and you tear your ACL, like you might be done, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, the economy sucks and you gotta go work at Kroger for a year. You're not done. You know what I mean? Like, you're not done. Like,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, you gotta make money. And if you can make it with the camera, that's probably preferred. But if it's gotta be supplemented, this is why I think like, Uber, driving for Uber, Lyft, that's a perfect way to make money silently. No one needs to know you're driving for Uber, right? And you can do that whenever. Like, that's why, I just think there's not enough room for excuses right now in the photo game, as far as like, how do I get here? How do I get there? It's like, What are some stumbling blocks to being a shooter? Money is a huge one. Well, you don't really have an excuse. Anybody can work right now. Not everybody, but the vast majority of people can go drive an Uber. They can go do all the various delivery services, right? When they want, right? Um, there's kind of no excuses, you know? And I think for me, all these menial jobs I did starting out were fine for me because I never lost sight of this dream of mine. You know what I mean? If your dream's that big, you know, parking cars at night isn't going to stop it. Like, because I'm like, as I'm parking a car, saying to myself, this is getting me that much closer to my dream. You know, if you can tell yourself that working at Kroger is not a failure, it's just part of the stepping stone to getting to where I'm trying to get, then it's fine. You know, I think if you go work at Kroger and you're like, that's it, you know, that would be sad. You know what I mean? So yes, get money however you can get it, so you're not walking around completely consumed by financial insecurity, you know?
Mhm. Yeah, yeah, definitely. Oof. I, every time you said it, like you walk differently if you're broke. I felt that. Every I think of every time, I'm like, oh yes, that's super true. Well, I'll let you hop off here, man, and take care of your family and get some work done. Appreciate you being on here, and look forward to having some more conversations and more so in person. I'd love to do this kind of thing in person again
For sure. All
once we are able to. Um, but I appreciate it, man, and I'll talk to you later.
right, sounds good. Have a good one.
You too, man. Thanks.
What you gonna play now?